Water is central to economic productivity and the social well-being of a population. In particular, safe drinking water contributes to the survival and good health of the people. The history of water and sanitation in Kenya is characterized by many challenges. Kenya's water and sanitation situation is characterized by inadequate access to safe and reliable water and basic sanitation for most of its population.
What I aspire to achieve while in office is to ensure that all Kenyans have access to clean and safe water. This is now a right for all Kenyans, as it's documented in our Constitution, the Kenya Constitution of 2010.
Given the country's continued growth in population and socio-economic pursuits, the demand for water has outstripped supply.
Water is a commodity that is not only for human use, it's used by domestic as well as wildlife. Water is also used for industrial activities like buildings, roads, construction, and many other industrial activities.
Piped water supply in particular can be traced to the colonial settlers. During colonial administration, water supply was carried out by the hydraulic branch of the Public Works Department. The first such supply was in the coastal city of Mombasa. The construction of the Uganda Railway in 1896 marked the starting point for the development of water pipelines to the interior of the country. Between 1920 and independence in 1963, the colonial government had put measures in place to regulate water supply. For example, in 1952, the Water Act Chapter 372 was enacted by the colonial government. This formed the legal basis for the water sector up to the year 2002.
The water sector in this country has been here as long as the country has existed. Pre-independence, the sector used to be regulated, managed and regulated through an ordinance, which had more lineage towards serving the white settlers. So you'll find that even water allocation, the white settlers were given first priority, then the rest of the Kenyans had to do with what was left. So that statute, when the country gained independence, was scrapped, and a new legislation, namely the Water Act 372, came into being. The Water Act 372 did serve the country all the way from slightly after independence to the year 2002.
Another important milestone was in 1921, when the Public Health Ordinance placed the sanitation sub-sector under the Ministry of Health. But due to a lack of physical sanitation structures such as sewerage systems and even pit latrines, sanitary measures imposed by the colonial government proved difficult to enforce. In 1964, a year after independence, the administration of water supply came under the Ministry of Agriculture. The government, recognizing that water is a social good, heavily subsidized water supply between 1970 and 1981. In the 1970s, local communities were encouraged to develop their own water supplies and set up water committees. In general, the country lacked the necessary trained manpower for effective water supply and sanitation development. Thus, in 1974, the Ministry of Water Resources Management and Development was created to address the many problems in the water and sanitation sectors.
The ministry is charged with the responsibility of provision of water as well as managing water resources within the country. Being a technical ministry, we have several departments that deal with the water resources as well as provision of water. As an administrator, we have non-technical staff that give support service to the technical staff in order to fulfill the mandate of the ministry.
The Water Ministry took over government-operated water schemes as well as those operated by county councils. In the same year, 1974, the National Water Master Plan Initiative, whose slogan was "Water for All by the year 2000, was also launched. Its primary aim was to develop new water supply schemes and bring water closer to the people by the year 2000. Unfortunately, due to the budgetary constraints of the 1980s and the early 90s, Water for All by the year 2000 was not realized.
What we did not realize at the time is that there were serious challenges in the area of resource availability, in the area of governance, because that particular law centralized water service provision, and the government, the central government, took the full responsibility of providing water for all Kenyans, something that was not attainable given the constraints of the economy at the time, the constraints of population that was growing very fast, etc., etc.
You are all aware, Kenyans overwhelmingly voted for a new constitution in 2010, and the government was required to align all its policies and all its acts to the constitution. We were also not left behind in that, so we also embarked on aligning the irrigation policy and irrigation act with the constitution.
Priority shifted to the rehabilitation of existing schemes and the construction of large-scale water projects such as the Baricho scheme in Mombasa and the Kilimanjaro water scheme. In 1983, government policy shifted towards decentralization and removed operation and maintenance responsibility from the ministry. Subsequently, in June 1988, the government established the National Water Conservation and Pipeline Corporation. Its role was to operate water supply systems under state control but on commercial basis.
When we were established in 1988, our mandate was to retail water. We retailed water directly to Kenyans. There were 39 water supplies under the National Water Conservation and Pipeline Corporation. These were in urban areas like Mombasa, Kakamega, Bungoma. We also had rural projects in places like Nyakach and Odaya. When the water sector reforms came in 2002, our mandate changed, which is now our current mandate. Basically, we construct large dams, we construct small dams and ponds, we drill and equip boreholes, we also construct flood control structures.
In 1992, the second National Water Master Plan was formulated. Its objective was to emphasize decentralization and create a demand-driven approach. It marked the beginning of commercially run water and sanitation companies. In 2002, the Water Act, known simply as the Water Act 2002, reorganized the water and sanitation sectors by introducing far-reaching reforms based on several principles. For example, water resource management became separated from the provision of water services. Secondly, policy making was separated from the day-to-day administration and regulation of water services. Thirdly, non-government entities could now participate in the management of water resources and in the provision of water services.
We rolled out the water sector reforms in Kenya, which was actually finally implemented under the Water Act 2002, that provided for that clear separation of roles, the policy, institutions to deal with the policy, institutions to deal with the water resource management, institutions to deal with the water services.
The reforms following the Water Act 2002 led to the creation of several new institutions in the water and sanitation sectors. The institutions are the Water Resources Management Authority, the Water Services Regulatory Board, the Water Services Boards, the Water Services Trust Fund, the Water Services Providers, and the Water Appeal Board.
Water Resources Management Authority, it was tasked with the mandate of managing the water resources. So in that respect, it does both regulation and management. One of the key achievements, in my view, is awareness creation. At least now Kenyans are aware that water resources must be looked after. So the focus here is to manage the resources so that the resources are sustainable.
If you have to have sustainable water services, it was realized that you had to separate the policy making function, the regulation, and the service provision. And WASREB now came about in terms of dealing with the regulatory function. And the regulation is basically about implementing the policies and strategies of the sector and making sure that those policies and strategies deliver as they are supposed to. And if they don't, the regulator is supposed to come up with measures, either policy review or other measures that may that ensure that the institutions deliver.
The mandate of the Water Services Trust Fund is to assist in financing the provision of water services in areas in Kenya without adequate services. So we assist communities and water service providers. And our major customers, the ones we deal with, are actually the informal settlements. So if you go in Nairobi and go to Mathare, you'll find we have done work. If you go to any other town, Loitoktok, Lodwar, name it, you'll find that we have supported the communities in those areas.
One of the reforms that was brought about was to bring into existence a body that would preside over the various disputes that would arise within the water sector. The board comprises of 3 persons: the chairman, who's a person of a retired judge or a person equivalent of that, and is appointed by the president, and 2 members who are appointed by the minister in charge, for the time being in charge of water affairs.
At the service delivery level, we have the water services boards. Currently we have 8 of them that have been charged with actual delivery of water and sanitation services in their areas of jurisdiction. They are also charged with development and holding of assets that are used in the development the delivery of these services. The water service boards do not do this directly alone. They contract water service providers within their areas of jurisdiction to do the actual supply of water and sanitation services.
Since inception, the water services boards have done and continue to do a commendable job in infrastructural development and provision of water and sanitation services. Nonetheless, there is still a lot more ground to cover in order to achieve water for all in line with the Vision 2030 and beyond.
There are a total of 8 water service boards in the country, and the legal responsibility as per the Water Act is to be responsible for the efficient and economic provision of water and sewerage services. The water service subsector in Kenya is a regulated industry, and therefore Athi Water operates under a license from the Water Services Regulatory Board. The area of jurisdiction of Athi Water covers both Nairobi County, Kiambu County, and Gatanga District in Murang'a County.
Coast Water Service Board is one of the 8 boards in the Republic. So the Coast Water Service Board is mandated to provide water in the whole of the coast region, and also to give infrastructure, new infrastructure and rehabilitation, so that we can provide water to the entire coast region. The board serves the 6 counties, namely Mombasa, where we are, Kwale, Taita Taveta, Tana River County, Lamu County, and Kilifi.
As a board, we cover 7 counties, namely Garissa, Wajir, Mandera, Marsabit, Cielo, Samburu, and Laikipia. And this is a very expansive area with a square kilometer of 245,000 and a population of 3.5 million people. We cover 70% of the livestock in the entire country. So you can see there is a huge burden on us in terms of provision of water services. And this is an area which has which is less endowed with water. So because most of the counties that we cover are basically arid or semi-arid in nature.
The Athi Water Service Board was formed in the year 2008. It's in charge of 4 counties, that is Kitui County, Machakos, Makueni, and Kajiado. Athi has got 13 water service providers spread over in those 4 counties, and also we have been running 38 districts, supervising the works being carried out by the district water officers.
Water services management has also been separated from water and sewerage services in order to focus on the management and protection of water sources in view of the water scarcity in the country.
Coming back to the main Directorate of Water Resources, the Water Resources is supposed to ensure all these water services board have access to the water resources that they can be able to develop and provide to the people of Kenya that can reach 100% water coverage.
Lake Victoria South is one of the 8 water services boards in Kenya. We cover an area of approximately 21,700 square kilometers in the western part of the country, covering the former Nyanza province and parts of the South Rift. We also cover a population of about 8.5 million people in this area. In our particular area, we have about 79% of the people living in the rural areas and 21% living in urban areas.
Victoria North Water Service Board covers 8 counties. Parts of Nandi County, Uasin Gishu, Elgeyo Marakwet, also parts, then Trans Nzoia, Bungoma, Busia, Vihiga, and Nandi. And that is a total coverage of about 15,000 square kilometers. And it picks about 7.1 million people. So with the funding of the World Bank, in liaison with the government of Kenya, we've been able to basically cover like the entire border area.
The country's poverty reduction strategy paper, developed between 2000 and 2003, as well as the economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation of June 2003, underscored the importance of implementation of structural reforms to make water and sewerage services autonomous, efficient and effective.
The Rift Valley Water Board covers 7 counties, basically in the basin, inland lake basins in this country. That means starting from Narok County, you come to Nakuru County, Nyandarua County, Baringo County, Elgeyo Marakwet, West Pokot, and Turkana. Those are 7 counties. As very quickly, you will note that this is where all the inland lakes of this country are. Lake Naivasha, Lake Elementaita, Lake Nakuru, Lake Turkana, Lake Baringo, Lake Bogoria. So it sounds like we have a lot of water resources in this basin.
We have actually made tremendous progress in the water sector in Kenya. There were reforms that were started via the Water Act of 2002. And although now we are facing devolution, the water sector has actually been devolved. And all we are doing now is arranging the different government instruments to ensure that services are provided. So we're working with all these counties to ensure that water services are not interrupted during this transition. We are also working with the district water officers to ensure that those parts of the country, particularly the rural parts of the country, that do not have water service providers, or in this case, water companies, also have access to water.
Our primary objective is really to ensure that water resources in this country are well preserved, conserved, treated, and piped to the people so that every Kenyan has clean and safe water in adequate quantities, which has, as you all know, has been enshrined in our constitution, and even human rights charters clearly stipulates that water is a human right.
The reforms also provide for a 3-tier institutional setup for water and sewerage services.
Throughout the country, there has been very little emphasis on the development of sewerage assets. But the board has taken a bold step, and we now have an affirmative action that for every key water supply that we develop, we are setting aside some money for the development of some sewerage infrastructure as well, so that we can take care of the wastewater that will be developed or that will be generated from our water supply systems.
Currently, public schemes are managed by the Ministry of Environment, Water and Natural Resources, the National Conservation and Pipeline Corporation, and by the counties. On the other hand, there are also non-government schemes which include private companies, community-owned schemes, and self-help organized schemes.
We are actually going to launch the National Water Master Plan. This is the second master plan after the 1992 National Water Master Plan. The National Master Water Plan is going to be one of the best water planning in Africa, in that it has used the technology, it has helped us to be able to identify all our sources of water and how best we can be able to manage and protect them and equitably allocate them to Kenya.
We have constructed several large dams in Kenya. As a corporation, we constructed Kirandich Dam. We also constructed the dam that provides water to Eldoret town. We also constructed the dam that provides water to Gilgil and Nakuru towns. But that is just a small part of what we've done on the dams. We also embarked on construction of 5 large dams in the year 2005, and in that year the dams basically were Kiserian Dam, Maruba Dam, Chemsusu Dam, Badasa Dam and Uma Dam.
We are moving away in most of our schemes, and in fact if you look at the large schemes, from the wild flooding, where we just flood water into a scheme, which is a very wasteful way of using water for irrigation, to more modern and more better technology. For example, we are now encouraging most of our farmers, and in fact in our schemes that we are developing together with the National Irrigation Board, we are using more in terms of drip irrigation. Now drip, of course, is only allows the plant to take the amount of water that it requires. Now that is a very, very method of irrigation that really saves on water. So that is also what we are looking at in terms, in fact, if you were to look at the current budget statement to Parliament this year, you will see that one of the key elements of that budget statement with respect to irrigation was that the government will put substantial amount of water, financial resources to an efficient way of irrigation to meet food security.
With the introduction of counties, water storage and irrigation functions are likely to attract a lot of interest in the county governments.
Water services that were usually handled by the water service boards will now be handled by the county governments. And we are in the process of preparing the county governments for this particular exercise.
We in the sector are talking about commercialization and democratization of the sector, where we want all stakeholders to be participants in the management of this very scarce resource. That is the only way we can guarantee sustainability.
Water coming from public water sources, and indeed even private, must be properly regulated, because it's an essential commodity and we cannot afford to have people charging their own things, creating artificial shortages, and then hiking the prices of water.
The Water Regulatory Board, WASREB, is the body mandated to issue licenses for extraction and use of water in the country.
For the players to actually make sure that water is actually playing its part in making sure that there is a decent quality of life, then regulation comes in. We regulate through various tools by making sure that those tools themselves are delivering and they are being implemented properly. We give licenses to water service boards for asset development, and we also approve service provision agreements. That is like a license to actually manage water within a certain area, which is given by the water service board to water company, and we actually have to approve that for it to have effect.
With regard to the use of water resources, whether that water is located on my farm as a spring or as underground on my farm as a groundwater, when I want to use that water, I must be able to have my right registered. That means I must apply for a permit to be given to me to allow me to use that water.
Anybody who wants to use water in bulk, be it a borehole, be it getting water from the river, we need to give you a permit. Now, this never used to be the case. And right now, our rate of permitting is picking up. And many Kenyans now who want to use water come to us for permitting. The good thing with permitting is that we then know who is taking how much water and what is available for other purposes.
The Water Services Trust Fund of 2004 was established with the aim of providing financial assistance towards capital investment in the water and sanitation sectors.
We are dealing with those people who have not benefited before from the resource allocation. And that is why we are called a trust fund, so that we can assist them to achieve their goals. So we do a lot of targeting. So if you come here, and although we are working around in the country in most of the areas, you might find we are not working in your area. And the reason is because we target and we use the poverty index. So the poverty index, especially in terms of the rural areas, will tell us those areas in Kenya which have never benefited from water services. Up to now, we have given water to almost 4 million people and also used around 4 billion Kenya shillings.
Competent manpower has been a challenge since and before Kenya's independence. The country has, however, made great strides in the development of relevant skills in the water and sanitation sectors.
The Kenya Water Institute began way back in the 1960s, and this was a training unit in the Department of Public Works. Then this training unit was upgraded to a training section in 1970. In 1974, the training section became a training water school. And then we moved on to 1985 when it became what is known as Kenya Water Institute. In the year 2001, Kenya Water Institute became a semi-autonomous agency, and it was established under the KEWI Act 2001.
Initially, the training in the water sector was conducted within the Hydraulic Department of Public Works in pre-independence Kenya.
Kenya Water Institute has grown from enrolling 20 students from 1960 to the current population of about 1,000 students. Kenya Water Institute develops human resources for the entire water sector. So since then, we have trained water technicians. All the water technicians that work in the water sector have been trained from KEWI.
The water sector has grown tremendously over the last few years since independence, particularly following the Water Act of 2002. A major contributor to the success story of the reforms is collaboration from development partners. Since independence and in recognition of the significant role water plays in economic and social development, the government has instituted various initiatives to improve access to water. A draft National Water Services Strategy for the years 2007 to 2015 was formulated in June 2007 with a mission to realize the Millennium Development Goals as well as those of Kenya's Vision 2030.
We have a lot of water, and the excitement about this is that this water that we've found in Turkana County in terms of the aquifer is not deep. It's only about 600 meters in terms of depth. So with precision, we should also be able to now drill the boreholes which will allow water supply to be available, especially to those who need it. The excitement about this is that we've also been tasked to irrigating almost 1 million hectares of the country. So this discovery of groundwater in the Turkana-Marsabit area means that these particular areas that are traditionally known as asals are potentially breadbasket areas. The excitement about this and using this technology, which is called WATEX, is that now we are preparing to do this survey for the entire country. Let me now turn my attention to the coast area and looking at Mombasa and Lamu in particular. The coast region, of course, is water scarce. And Mombasa, like Nairobi, also depends on surrounding counties for water provision. What we are exploring is options of using the Indian Ocean water. So we're now exploring the option of desalinating water from the Indian Ocean, both for drinking water but also for industrialization. Turning to Lamu, we're also planning to do the same, which is to have a desalination plant in Lamu. As you are aware, because of the LAPSET project, Lamu is envisioned as a growth area, both in terms of industry, services, and also tourism.
The draft National Water Strategy is based on the identification of sustainable access to safe water and basic sanitation as a human right and an economic good. The water and sanitation sectors are currently undertaking massive structural investments in every region of the country. As Kenya celebrates 50 years of its independence, the country can look back to the story of water with a sense of optimism. Water is central to economic productivity and the social well-being of a population. In particular, safe drinking water contributes to the survival and good health of the people. The history of water and sanitation in Kenya is characterized by many challenges. Kenya's water and sanitation situation is characterized by inadequate access to safe and reliable water and basic sanitation for most of its population.
What I aspire to achieve while in office is to ensure that all Kenyans have access to clean and safe water. This is now a right for all Kenyans, as it's documented in our Constitution, the Kenya Constitution of 2010.
Given the country's continued growth in population and socio-economic pursuits, the demand for water has outstripped supply.
Water is a commodity that is not only for human use. It's used by domestic as well as wildlife. Water is also used for industrial activities like buildings, roads, construction, and many other industrial activities.
Piped water supply in particular can be traced to the colonial settlers. During colonial administration, water supply was carried out by the hydraulic branch of the Public Works Department. The first such supply was in the coastal city of Mombasa. The construction of the Uganda Railway in 1896 marked the starting point for the development of water pipelines to the interior of the country. Between 1920 and independence in 1963, the colonial government had put measures in place to regulate water supply. For example, in 1952, the Water Act Chapter 372 was enacted by the colonial government. This formed the legal basis for the water sector up to the year 2002.
Water sector in this country has been here as long as the country has existed. Pre-independence, the sector used to be regulated, managed and regulated through an ordinance which had more lineage towards serving the white settlers. So you'll find that even water allocation, the white settlers were given first priority, then the rest of the Kenyans had to do with what was left. So that statute, when the country gained independence, was scrapped, and a new legislation, namely the Water Act, Water Act 372, came into being. The Water Act 372 did serve the country all the way from slightly after independence to the year 2002.
Another important milestone was in 1921 when the Public Health Ordinance placed the sanitation sub-sector under the Ministry of Health. But due to a lack of physical sanitation structures such as sewerage systems and even pit latrines, sanitary measures imposed by the colonial government proved difficult to enforce. In 1964, a year after independence, the administration of water supply came under the Ministry of Agriculture. The government, recognizing that water is a social good, heavily subsidized water supply between 1970 and 1981. In the 1970s, local communities were encouraged to develop their own water supplies and set up water committees. In general, the country lacked the necessary trained manpower for effective water supply and sanitation development. Thus, in 1974, the Ministry of Water Resources Management and Development was created to address the many problems in the water and sanitation sectors.
The ministry is charged with the responsibility of provision of water as well as managing water resources within the country. Being a technical ministry, we have several departments